Hello, a very good day to you. Today we're here for the next interview with some very interesting interview partners. This is Uwe from Courses by and with Uwe. So, Wolfgang Bucher from Bucher GmbH. Well, I first came across his products and software at the end of 2009 and then got to meet him personally around 2012, either during a training session or a conversation. Bucher GmbH has now celebrated its 30th anniversary. So, dear Wolfgang, tell us a bit about yourself, what Bucher GmbH has accomplished, and let's see where this takes us. Sure. First of all, thank you very much for the interview. I'm of course delighted to be here. About me. I was born in 1960, completed my training as a business IT specialist, and happened to meet a friend in 1989 who asked me if I could develop a billing program for him, for alternative practitioners.
Getroffen, der hat mich dann gefragt, ob ich nicht ein Abrechnungsprogramm für ihn entwickeln kann für Heilpraktiker.
By the way, warm greetings to Kurt Lebermann in Aalen, who is partly responsible for the existence of Bucher GmbH. Back then, I developed a billing program based on his specifications, initially for the Commodore 64. The program was gradually further developed and in 1990 offered to other alternative practitioners under the name Medifast. The C64 quickly became too limited, of course, so we continued development on a Commodore PC-20 with the MS-DOS operating system. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the PC-20. Are you? You're probably too young for that. No, I'm more familiar with the ones from the competing country, which were called Robotron. Okay, got it. Anyway, in the years that followed, Microsoft developed Windows. So, the initial development actually happened before Windows even existed. We kept modernizing the system alongside the evolution of Windows, while also continuously adding more features. Up to that point, I had been developing the system on my own, as a side business. I still had another job, and in 1994 I decided to quit my position as an industrial clerk, where I worked for a company, and went fully independent. That same year, in 1994, we built a few office spaces next to my parents' house, and I founded Bucher GmbH, together with my mother. Now, my mother, this isn't strictly relevant to the topic, but for the sake of completeness, was working as a property developer at the time, building single and multi-family homes, while I was developing software for alternative practitioners at Bucher GmbH. Christine, my wife, was also hired by Bucher GmbH right away and has been handling the office work for the company to this day. I'll just skip over a few unpleasant years in which I was involved in a major legal dispute that ended in a settlement. However, I wouldn't want to miss those years entirely, as I learned a lot during that time, particularly about copyrights, lawyers, and our legal system in general. All right, fair enough. So, your Medifast billing software was your main product. In which year did you introduce a major expansion? Those expansions are your main products today. Can you tell us a bit about those expansions? Yes, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish talking about my mother and that part, so we can close it off. About 10 years later, my mother retired and stopped her work as a property developer. However, I could no longer manage everything on my own, programming and supporting clients at the same time. It was just too much for a one-man operation. That's why in 2004 I hired Andreas, my programmer, among others, and he's still working with me to this day. Around 2005, I started coming into contact with the topic of radionics more and more often through my many connections with alternative practitioners and healers. That's how I ended up starting the Bucher Vita Coach project, with the help of several radionics experts, most of whom were alternative practitioners and coaches. This is where the separation you just mentioned between billing software and radionics began. This project has practically been a part of our company's work since 2005. We then presented our product at all the major trade fairs in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. The most important fairs were in Karlsruhe, Munich, and Baden-Baden. As far as I know, it was in Baden-Baden that I also met Matthias Hess. A warm greeting to him as well. He worked with us until his retirement and still supports us as much as he can to this day. I believe it was through him that I eventually got in touch with you. That's correct. As I mentioned, it was around 2009 when he first showed me the Aura Coach. That was already an evolution of what you're describing now. But as I said, we're going step by step, taking a general look at everything, jumping around a bit. I think we'll make another video as well. We're keeping the videos short, not hours long. We'll see what topic we choose in a few minutes, and of course, at some point focus more on you. After all, I believe it was over 600 kilometers I had to drive to meet you back then. Yes, exactly, because you're near Aalen, with the 2 A's. Exactly, that's right. Back then, if I can continue, it was also the time when we organized our own conferences, particularly in Aalen. We invited all of our customers and interested parties, and sometimes we had up to 80 participants attending. It was a really wonderful time, which has of course slowed down a bit due to COVID. Another important event for Bucher GmbH happened in 2012. That was when I got to know and appreciate Hermann Grosser. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2021 at the age of 81, partly due to COVID. During the years of our collaboration, he provided countless ideas and inspiration to me and Bucher GmbH. He had extensive knowledge of radionics and energy medicine, as well as one of the largest libraries on the subject, as far as I know. Interestingly, he was also born on November 10th, just like me. We had a great mutual respect for each other. I'd even say we were far more than just business partners. It's also important to mention his last book, which he completed just a few months before his death. It's titled Super Placebo. This book delves into the topics of energy medicine, radionics, and especially bioresonance. Radionics is, of course, the foundation of all the products we offer. However, that would probably be too much for today's discussion. We can certainly cover that in more detail in the next video. We can do that. As I said, in the next video, we could, for example, talk about, you've written 2 books so far, if I'm correct, 1 ebook and 1 in print. And of course, we could also discuss the topic of radionics, how it works and what it does. Many people probably can't really picture what it is. We'd be happy to cover that in another video. Yes, and perhaps looking further ahead, we could briefly explain one of these programs. I know it's hard to cover it in just 15 to 20 minutes. It's something I've experienced myself. We don't have to show all the functions right away. We can just go through a few sections, or the standard process, which would keep it manageable. Yes, that's true. And there are programs that are more complex and others that are simpler. As you've mentioned, your system is modular, just to touch on a few things ahead of time. It's not like someone has to buy one big program with hardware where they might only need 10 out of the 100 functions. Instead, they can simply purchase the 10 functions they need. That's one of the advantages of Bucher GmbH. You can choose only what you want, or have everything if you prefer. Thank you for your time. My pleasure. And we'll see how we introduce the next topic, maybe in 1 or 2 weeks. Radionics, what it is. And we can also present your books. I'll include a link to your website under this video, and if there's anything else you'd like me to add, just send it over to me. Otherwise, I wish all the listeners and viewers a good evening, a good morning, or a good day, depending on when you're watching this. See you next time. This is Uwe from Courses by and with Uwe. So Wolfgang, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Dankeschön. Tschüss.
Goodbye.
Ciao.
Ciao.